So there was just some experiential depth I think I had when I played the acoustic guitar that was just not present when I played the electric guitar. I started to realize that when I was playing the kind of music I played in the band I was in, I felt like I was opening myself up to a lot of emotions that were not, I don't want to say I was opening myself up to entities or something. Like Captain Beefheart he wrote these like 10 commandments for guitar players or something and talked about the guitar being a divining rod and said the electric guitar summons Beelzebub. The acoustic guitar summons Casper, but the electric guitar summons
Right.
Beelzebub. And the blues musicians, when they started to get amplifiers, they called it their devil box. They believed there was something like diabolical about it or some dark energy they were attracting. And you play really loud music, there's at least this self-immolatory feeling about it when you're playing through a huge, like, wall of speakers and stuff like I was.
Uh,
And I just couldn't deal with that anymore. I really needed to find something just quieter and more like gentler and more self-contained. And I got sick of being in such a masculine environment too. It's so phallic, this particular genre of metal where it's all about the size of your backline. It's all
uh,
about wattage and how big, how many cabinets you have, and just how pointy your guitar is, or how I just got sick of all of that and had to make my way out of it.
well, that gentleness is something that I respect a lot in your music. I mean, I know you're perfectly capable of being loud and expressing all kinds of other emotions, but there's a gentleness to me that kind of runs through it that is something I care about a great deal, and I find it really inspiring. I feel like in your guitar playing, there's something very of the earth to it. It reminds me of wind. Like wind through a wheat field or something. If you think about the rhythm of how the wind hits the wheat, there's a curve to the shape. There's a flow to it that is not taka 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 taka, you know? I hear that explicitly in a lot of your strumming patterns, and
Hmm.
you create this texture that's really fluid that I just find it really beautiful and inspiring.
Appreciate your kind words there. Are you familiar with Nur Ali Elahi? Ostad Elahi is how he's referred to most of the time. You would be really fascinated by him in general. He was a Kurdish Iranian. His father is named Haj Nimatullah. He's revered almost as a saint in the Kurdish religion. I don't know if you know about the Kurds have their own kind of religious tradition that goes back to like the 14th century. It's called Yarsin in Kurdish or Ali Haq in Persian. Ostad Elahi was a jurist, and then when he retired from that, and this was in like pre-revolution Iran, he was actually kind of progressive about some issues, but he retired from that and then started to write. And some of his work is it's in this tradition of I guess particularly Iranian philosophy. Like I mentioned Averroes earlier and how he was exiled from the Islamic world, and that to some extent is one of the things that kind of put an end to this particular Islamic golden age when the power was centered more in the Arab world.
Mm-hmm.
He's moved to the east a little bit, and you start to get like Persian culture being where a lot of the Persian culture being where a lot of Islamic culture developed. Nur Ali Elahi was a masterful musician. He played the tambur, which is very important to Kurdish people, the three-string, very simple instrument. And so much of what I do with my right hand comes from that instrument. It has this incredibly fluid thing, like what I'm doing with my hands right now. I have to make it work on guitar. I tend to move my hand a little bit. Robbie Basho did so much of that too. I know he was influenced by Iranian music, but Ostad Elahi never performed concerts. But even like as a child, when he had this very like ascetic kind of upbringing under the guidance of his father. If you look at pictures of him when he was a teenager, he had this long hair. He lived in not complete isolation, but he was very like devoted to God, to just having this knowledge of God and God's plan for him and so on. And he just, I guess, read and prayed and played the tambour and associated with some other kind of people of this mystical orientation. But that was about it until he got into his 20s, and then he like cut his hair into what was fashionable at the time. He passed the judicial exams and became a very accomplished jurist in Iran. But the tambour was with him through all of that. It was just like a personal kind of, almost like a tool for meditation, I guess, to some extent. But it has such an airy sound. It's very, it's just wood, the wood and metal. The strings are metal, and they're really light gauge.
Mm-hmm.
My friend that I studied with a little bit, that I mentioned in reference to the dervish that I met, my friend that comes to Boston and plays at Rumi night, studied a little bit with Ostad Elahi.
Oh, wow.
And I took a few tambour lessons just to see. And the first thing he said is, you can't have fingernails when you play it. And I cut my fingernails just to see what it would be like. And it sounded terrible for me to try that, because I'm so used to using my fingernails for guitar and banjo and other instruments. But when you play the tambour, you're not supposed to have any nails at all, apparently. So that put an end to my desire to actually be able to play the tambour the way it's supposed to be played. But I still, was able to sit and watch this person and like incorporate some of that into my playing.
Mm-hmm.
But so much of that, the sound that you're talking about, that airiness and that kind of fluid, like constant sound that's rhythmic, but it's not like a steady kind of rhythm. So much of that comes from the tambour and comes from Ostad Elahi.